We've finished the turnout, and it needs a little bit of cleanup. I've just been a little heavy-handed with solder on the tabs for my new experimental throw bar. I've gone ahead and taken the spacer bar off to make these a little more accessible. So now what I want to do is I want to just make sure I get the excess solder off of these points, and that we get a nice right angle clean inside edge here where it's going to mate up against the notch in the stock rail. So I have just a square profile jeweler's file now, and I'm going to go ahead and just touch that up and try and get it squared up. I have those filed off. I might have created a little bit of a problem for myself, and maybe you can see it here. As I filed this off, I took the foil off clear down to the fiber on this portion that slides under the stock rail. For now, that's not a problem, but if I ever have to resolder this, we're only going to have this side of the tab to solder this point rail to again, so that might be a problem. Another thing that's happened is this standard gauge diverging route point rail has come off the throw rod. I'll have to get that back in gauge and resolder that. Join me here in just a moment when we finish tidying up these points. Okay, here we are now with the spacer bar back in place, and I've supported the stock rails and the point rails, and I wanted to show you now how the throw bar will work with it fully diverge to the diverge point over here. Get nice gaps on the standard gauge divergent route stock rails, and when we push it for the straight route, a pretty good fit on the through points in their respective notches over here. There might be a little bit more fine-tuning there. I'll do that when probably when I place the turnout on the layout. The next thing we need to do is we just need to clean up all of the surfaces where those tabs move across the bottom of the rail, so that when we get this in place, these points will move freely. I want to do that with some fine grade sandpapers. I've now taken and cut a strip of sandpaper off of some 220 grit. What I want to do now is I want to polish the underside of the stock rails. So I'm going to slide the sandpaper abrasive side up. I'm going to come in here. If I rub this way, we're going to get the underside of the base of the rail. If I pull it vertical, we're going to get the inside of the point notch. I'm going to do the same for the narrow gauge and the standard gauge stock rails. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to put the abrasive side down. And while maintaining just a little bit of upward pressure on these tabs, I want to just clean the top of the tab just a little bit. I'm going to hold these rails in a little bit of approximation with a clip. Go ahead and do the same for the narrow gauge. Off camera, to kind of seal all the soldering work we've done, I've given my turnout a light coat of just some appropriate rust color spray paint. And here's the turnout as we're ready to begin the next step. What we're going to do is we're going to lay it now onto the ties of the turnout. I now have the turnout ties roughly in place, and now I need to do some work to get them the right length. I've been using about an 18-inch overhang outside of my rail for my tie width. It just looks pleasing to me, and so what I want to do now is I want to just put a little mark on the rail at 18 inches here and here, and at the end 18 inches. Placing my turnout in position, and you can see what I've done here. I have one of the switch stand ties and another switch stand tie, and in the middle is a third, and that's going to be my space for passage of the throw rod. I'm going to move that out of the way for just a moment. You know, maybe I won't. I'm going to leave it there. Things are just a little unstable. When I put my rail here in the section that's outside of the turnout, I'm going to come to the other side of the rails. I'm going to come out 18 inches and put a mark. Now with the rail out of the way, I want to see how long that tie is. 7.5 feet. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come along I'm just going to give a little mark at 18 inches on. I'm going to measure out 18 inches on each of these. Let's do this on the. So 18 inches on the dial caliper. Right there. Get the rail back in place. Go. I'm just going to come along here and just make a little mark in each of these that's 18 inches out. I'll now remove the turnout. I'm going to get my scale gauge again, and I know scale. What I'm going to do is I've got 7.5 foot turnouts, ties under the main portion of the railroad. Oh, let's say the railroad kicked them up to 8 feet. So I'm going to go down the rails, or down the ties, and I'm going to mark 8-foot ties. Those are our switch stand. We don't need those. In the case where the mark that I've made comes inside the foot mark I'm measuring, I'll expand the length by 1 foot, and we're coming close. Here I've got about 3 inches of tie left. Oh, I gotta back up a little bit. Yep, still there. Still there. That one's the last one that can use an 8. This one is too close, so I'm now going to kick it out to a 9-foot tie. So now with 9-foot tie, I'm going to come along and mark these. This one is the last one that can be a 9-foot tie. My 18-inch mark is at the 9-foot length. This one is 9.5. I'm going to kick this out to a 10-foot tie. Give a mark. 10-foot tie, give a mark. 10-foot tie is now not long enough to do my 8. Yep, just long enough on this one. This one, it's just long enough. Now we have to go to an 11-foot tie. I'm going to mark an 11-foot. 11. That one is just at 11, so now we have to go to a 12. 12-foot tie. 12-foot tie. 12-foot just fits this one. Now we have to go to a 13-foot tie. 13. 13. 13 just fits here. Now we have to go to a 14-foot tie. 14-foot. 14-foot just finishes that off for the next two. It's just right. So now with those length marks in place, I want to cut my ties. I'll now bring out my short line chopper and I'll remove the tie. Chop it off to length. And I'll place it back in the jig. Now I'm going to begin to make some materials for tie plates. What I have here is just a piece of thin ABS plastic. I think this is about 20 thousandths thick. It might be 10 thousandths thick. I'm not sure. In my era of turn of the 19th century, tie plates were about 7 inches wide, about 10 or 11 inches long. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make some marks in this ABS at about, I'm going to do 9 inches. It'll just be an easier number for me. So I'll make a couple of indexing marks for 9 inches. 9 inches and 9 inches. I'll come out here a little ways, I'll do the same thing. I'm now just going to scribe off a long strip. I now want to show you my technique for putting the rails onto the ties. The first thing I did was I took the through route straight stock rail and spiked it next to the ties in the position I wanted and made sure it was straight. The next thing I did was I came in and I made sure that the narrow gauge and the standard gauge through route were straight and in gauge. And then I'll come back and I'll do the diverging route in just a moment. But what I wanted to show you now is how I do my tie plates, individual tie plates. So let's start right here. You can see this is that strip of plastic that I cut earlier. And what I do is I insert it under the rails until it gets to the point where there's enough protruding here that it represents the width of the tie plate in the actual application. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pin vise with a needle in it, and I'm going to make my holes for my spikes. In the time period that I'm modeling, there's 2 holes per side, but if I wanted to model a little later where there's 4 holes per side, it wouldn't be any problem. So with these holes punched through the plastic strip, I then get my spike, and I'll go ahead and drive my spike. Now for my railroad, it's just 1 per side. One on the other side. I can check the gauge now or later. It doesn't really make much difference. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll use my HO gauge, NMRE standard gauge, and I'll check it. And it's right on. Just a little bit here. Press that in. Gauge is true. Good. So now at this point, I've decided I'm going to have individual tie plates for narrow gauge and standard gauge. So I'm going to get my X-Acto chisel. I'm going to bring it to the width of the tie plate and just give it a little punch. So now it is free. I'll draw the plastic back until it's the width of the tie plate once again. And I can go ahead and put my spike holes into the plastic. I can drive a spike now to hold all the items together. Spike holes on the other side. And again, we'll check to make sure it's engaged. It's nicely there. And I trim it off. There's only about 100 more tie plates to go. With all the tie plates complete and the rails cleaned up, it's time for me to stain my ties. I just use a variety of leather dyes in isopropyl alcohol, 70%. Just going to apply it now.